It's no secret that Singaporeans love food. I'm sure many of us enjoy our delicious local delicacy, from chicken rice to chilli crab and satay, and we wouldn't want them to go to waste. But wait, what about the excess food from our kitchen, such as the vegetables and fruit peel? Do we just toss them into the bin, or can we use them for another purpose? I'm Fiona, and welcome back to EcoBytes. In this episode, we will rediscover the journey of our kitchen food scraps. And now, let's meet a local expert who will be able to show us how to turn this waste into treasure. Let's go! Hey Qingwei, so good to see you here today.
Hi Fiona, good to see you too. Have a seat.
Sure, thank you.
Well, I see you've brought something with you today.
Yes, indeed, I've brought some food scraps with me. So could you show me how we can turn this into something useful?
Sure, I would definitely turn that into compost. I am part of Project Black Gold, where we engage with 3 neighbourhoods in Singapore to make community food scrap compost. So what happens is the households contribute their food waste once a week to a compost pile, and we lead them, guide them in how to make compost. And we turn it into something nutritious for the soil, and then they can use it in their community gardens.
So how does composting help to manage our food scraps?
Well, what composting does is it takes food scraps that would otherwise go into the incinerators. It takes all that food scraps and turn it into a rich organic matter that will go into our community gardens to enrich our soil. So we actually don't really have to buy soil again. And as you know, buying soil is a very unsustainable act, both financially and also for the environment. It is extremely environmentally destructive to dig up soil from another country and truck it all the way into Singapore. So by making our own compost, we actually are able to be self-sufficient in terms of enriching our own soil. And in the long run, by continuously adding compost to the soil, it actually helps sequester carbon more efficiently.
You mentioned carbon sequestering. How does that work?
Well, when you apply compost to soil, it enriches the soil by introducing a huge amount of microorganisms. So a healthy soil is able to better interact with the roots of the plants, the bushes, the trees that are growing on it to soak up the carbon from the atmosphere. So as you know, high levels of carbon emissions in the atmosphere leads to climate warming. So when you start to pull that carbon away from the atmosphere and into the soil and keep it there, you are actually helping to gradually reverse the global warming phenomenon that is happening.
You have shared so much about composting. Are there any common misconceptions people have about composting?
Well, what we found was there are 2 misconceptions. The first one is compost is smelly. The second one is compost will attract a lot of pests to the garden. So both are not true, obviously. The reason why compost would be smelly, usually it's because the proportions of the carbon and nitrogen materials are not in balance. So it's pretty much like cooking. When you add too much of something, you get too much salt or too much taste too sweet. So it's just a matter of readjusting that. So likewise with compost, when something is smelly, it means that the food scraps, there are too much of it. So it starts to break down really fast, and there's not enough of the carbon to balance it. So it's actually rotting takes place, and that's where the sting comes from. To get rid of the smell, what you need to do is just add more carbon. So by carbon, I would mean like throw in more dried leaves, sawdust, cocoa peat, brown materials, and give it a toss, add some oxygen, water it, and the microbes will be happy again and functioning normally again, and you would find that the smell would go away immediately. So the second thing was that compost will attract a lot of pests. Now, a well-made compost, when it heats up properly, it gets up to 65 degrees Celsius. So at that temperature, you know, you don't find cockroaches, you don't find spiders or rats or whatever hanging around there because it's just so hot. And when you open up the compost, you can actually see steam coming up. So that's why a well-made compost will not attract pests. The reason why compost heats up that much is because the microbial community in there is having a party. They are actively digesting the food scraps and also getting their carbohydrates from the brown stuff. So when they are that happy, they generate a lot of heat, they use up a lot of oxygen, and that is where the heat comes from.
But is it easy to learn composting?
Yes, it's very easy to learn composting. Once you understand the simple steps and also the proportion of carbon to nitrogen ingredients, that's where most people get it wrong. But once you understand the proportion, then you can pretty much make compost in any space and any container. So even a container like this big.
Oh, okay.
You can make it at home, and you can make compost efficiently in this size. So Regent Heights is a condo with 600 households. They are actually the first neighborhood that Project Black Gold is working with. What they did was they transformed a deserted strip of land behind their car park into a community garden. And whilst they're building that garden, they also integrated a composting site into it. And then they tried to make compost with their food scraps and some soil. And what happened was they ended up making compost that even they themselves were in doubt of the quality of the compost they made. And so after a while, interest died down and they pretty much kind of abandoned the site. So when Project Black Gold worked with them, we started guiding them on the steps that they can take to make a better pile and also the proportion of ingredients. So as you can see now, they are confidently and happily making compost every Sunday. In fact, making compost has become like a key feature or key activity for their community garden. The garden is actually situated near the back gate, so there's a lot of traffic going to and fro. And people are starting to wonder, like, why are these guys just sitting around every Sunday morning cutting up stuff, using a pitchfork and shoveling away? What are they doing? So there were a lot of people dropping in to have a look and ended up joining the garden group. The gardeners are finding that more and more people are interested to come around, and when you sit around and cut, you end up interacting with your neighbors more. There's a lot more chatting about things happening, a lot more collaboration. Like someone would go to the market and get the, say, extra like jackfruit peel or vegetables that the vegetable seller could not sell or they're bad. So they brought them back and everyone just sits around and cut them up. So the actual act of making the compost, which is the layering part, only takes about, say, 15 minutes. But this group is happy to commit 2 whole hours every Sunday to just sitting around because they can, interact with each other, chit chat, cut. So that kind of activity, I think, has strengthened the community spirit, the bond within this neighborhood. One thing I wanted to add was also that some people have become such hardcore food scrappers. So food scrapper is a word that we kind of made up at Project Black Gold. It means that people who are willing to sacrifice their fridge and freezer space to store food scraps, wait 1 week, and then come down and make compost. So they have become so hardcore that they are thinking that maybe instead of keeping it at home, we are going to buy a second-hand community freezer, put it in near the garden, and the households can actually drop off food scraps throughout the week. So that frees up freezer space. And we still end up with a whole chest of food scraps that we can use in the compost pile on Sunday. Another interesting thing is that the gardeners now cannot wait to harvest the compost. They're like always asking, when is it maturing? And they're learning to read the signs to understand when the compost is matured enough. So compost is like making cheese or wine. There needs to be a certain period for the microbes to do their stuff and for the product to mature. And once that has matured, they would be harvesting that and spreading it around their garden. So there was this one very experienced gardener. He's been growing vegetables elsewhere in other parts of the garden. and we wanted to use the Tyson seeds from ant parks. We wanted to sprout the seedlings and then spread the compost and put the seedlings in the ground and see how they grow.
Yep.
And he swore, based on his experience in another part of this garden, that his Tyson will never grow beyond a certain size. It's impossible in Singapore's weather to have Tyson, you know, exposed to the sun and rain and everything, grow beyond a certain size.
Really?
Yeah. And then when he found out that we were going to apply the compost directly on the soil and stick the seedlings in there, he was like, your seedlings are going to die because the compost is too rich or something like that. So, but we proved him wrong. And in the end, he said that, yeah, you are right. And I was like, yes, because it's great to see that when you have a row of seedlings that after a few weeks grow into this Tyson that was bigger than what he expected. People were just like, when can we harvest and when can we eat? So I never even got to taste. Everybody just harvested them as soon as they were ready and then they were gone. So now we're actually into our third batch of seedlings. So that's how fast the seedlings are growing, and people are just keeping, you know, harvesting. After harvesting the vegetables, they apply more matured compost, put in more seedlings, and then it grows. A few weeks later, you harvest and the cycle keeps going. And now it's become so normal that people are like, yeah, you know, we grow our own, yeah, so what, you know. So it used to be something really special, and now it's become the norm, which is a really nice new normal to have.
Wow, you guys are like the cool neighborhood now, growing our own food.
Yeah, and we have other people who don't live in the condo come and say, can we give you our food scraps? Can we have a look and see how you're making compost? And so now we end up having open house about once a month, where we invite outsiders to come in and get their hands dirty and have some, you know, do some pitchfork moves, and then they go away and think like, maybe I can start that in my neighborhood. And that is the vision of Project Black Gold, which is we want to use our 3 neighborhoods as test beds for certain ideas. And we hope that when people come and get inspired and want to do something, they have a bit of grounding and example to follow, and they can bring that back and replicate that in their own neighborhoods. We basically want to see more and more composting sites happening in neighborhoods all over Singapore.
I think to better understand what these residents are doing, let's head down to the garden. Sitting right next to a busy road, this little garden at the Regent Heights condo is bursting with life. It is still early, and what I can see are mostly the beautiful plants and occasionally butterflies and bees flying around. However, on every Sunday when it's near 10 AM, residents start streaming in with their bags of kitchen scraps. While I'm loving the community spirit here, I do wonder how this community garden project has benefited the residents.
I have no idea about these kind of things we can do here. Every time we throw all of our food scrap or kitchen waste directly into the dustbin, which go directly into the incineration process. But now we are just collecting each and everything here. We put all the fruit peel and dried veggies, everything directly into the freezer and come here on each Sunday and put it in the compost bin. And now it just disappears because it turns into the compost, which is the black gold for us.
So it really helps to know your neighbors better, and you maybe meet in the garden, but then when you kind of bump into each other in the lift or at the condo, you know, like, yes, a hi here, hi there, how are you doing? And it definitely made us come together much closer. Also, prior to COVID, actually, we used to meet quite like once a month at one of the members' house, and then we would cook for each other or do something like a potluck. And that was super nice because we could also experience different cuisines, and that was really like a nice way to befriend your neighbors as well outside of working together in the garden.
Yes, it has been a very pleasant experience. Earlier, before getting connected with the project goal, we were trying to do composting by ourselves, but that was not working out very good. We were like, sometimes it was rotting, sometimes there were a lot of worms there, rats started coming. So when we got connected to project goal and Chingwe started mentoring us properly, so things have really moved faster and to the betterment of the garden.
Starting a composting project may sound very challenging without knowing the right ingredients and methods to use. Don't worry, Chingwei got us covered. Let's learn how to start our open compost pile.
So here we are at the compost station. Making compost is essentially like making lasagna or kueh lapis. It's all about layering. So there are two kinds of layers in a compost. One is called a carbon layer and one is called nitrogen. And you can have as many layers as you wish until you completely run out of ingredients to put in. So by carbon, most people know it as the browns. Browns could be anything like dried leaves, dried grass. It could be toilet paper roll is considered a kind of carbon. So if you have lots of toilet paper roll, you can tear them out and put it in the compost as well. Another good thing to put into your compost in terms of carbon material would be sawdust. So here what we use at Bukit Gombak is sawdust from Singapore street trees. We collect it from a woodworking studio where they take Singapore street trees and turn them into furniture. And by doing so, they have a lot of offcuts and they generate a lot of sawdust, which usually gets thrown out. So what we've done here is we've collected the sawdust from the woodworking gallery and used it in our compost. Another thing that we use a lot of in terms of carbon are the grass clippings from this estate. As you can see, it's a garden that we're in, and almost every week they generate a lot of offcuts and prunings. So what we do for carbon is we dry them and we cut them up and use them in the compost. So everything is recycled. Now I'll go into nitrogen. So nitrogen, as we know, is the green layer. So green layer would be obviously your vegetable scraps. Visually, they look green. But fruit peels are also an essential nitrogen ingredient in a compost. So fruit peels will be like your usual, whatever you can find in the supermarket or wet market. Banana peels, pineapple peels, your apple core, as well as any rotting fruit that you can't eat anymore. Don't throw them up. We use them in our compost. So when we make compost, it's really about cultivating microbes. Microbes are the ones that give soil its life and fertility. So by building the compost in layers, what we're essentially doing is the microbes that already exist in our environment will be having basically a party and a pretty good life in the compost. They will be eating up the food scraps, reproducing, pooping, doing the whole life cycle thing inside the compost. And that is exactly what we want in a compost. It's not about making soil, it's actually about growing microbes. And when the compost is suitably matured, it will be like essentially yogurt for the soil, probiotics for the soil. What we do is when we spread the compost into the soil, we are introducing microbes back into the soil and regenerating the soil. So when you grow vegetables and you're thinking your vegetables are going to take up a lot of nutrients from the soil, what they are really taking up is really microbial waste products, which is a polite way of saying microbial poop. By making compost and introducing more varieties of microbes into the soil, we're essentially creating a buffet of food for our plants. Different microbes produce different waste products and they contain different trace elements and nutrients. So imagine a plant roots in the soil seeking out different things that they need, because not all plants need the same thing. And it helps them grow bigger and better and healthier. And we end up eating more nutrient-dense vegetables and fruit as a result.
To make an open pile aerobic compost, also known as hot compost, start with a layer of brown and follow with a layer of green. Keep building the compost layer by layer, alternating between browns and greens. From the perspective of the microorganisms, the browns provide carbohydrates while the greens build protein. We use an overall ratio of 1 part nitrogen to 3 parts carbon. This means you should always have more browns on standby to balance the amounts of green. Otherwise, the pile will end up stinking. This may sound a bit complex, but think of it like cooking. It is both an art and a science. Getting the proportions right will come from practice and experience. Remember that the microorganisms in the compost need water too, so sprinkle water on the layers as you go along. Sometimes the food scraps are frozen, because as the household accumulates food scraps throughout the week, it's easier to keep them in the freezer to stop them from smelling. The frozen food scraps don't affect the compost at all. In fact, they break down faster as they thaw. When you have added the last layer of greens, always top it off with a final thick layer of brown. In the coming weeks, we will toss the compost to aerate it a few more times and also feed and water it. After that, we leave it to rest and mature. A compost this size usually takes around 2.5 months from making to being ready for harvest. How do you know a compost is ready? A well-made, matured compost smells like fresh earth because of the presence of beneficial bacteria. It feels soft, crumbly, and lightly moist. When you squeeze it, it forms into a ball, yet it's not sticky and falls apart easily at a touch.
And this is how you make compost.
It's heartening to see the extra efforts our community is taking to do their part for the environment and to manage our food waste. So with that, are there any exciting plans for Project Black Gold in the future?
Yes, definitely. In the new year, we are going to start on our next phase. Apart from the freezer that I'm really looking forward to, it'll be like probably the first in Singapore to have a food scrap freezer just for composting. So the second thing I'm really excited about is that the management committee in Regent Heights actually want to get the children of the estate involved in compost making. So in the new year, we will be mentoring the next generation of compost makers. If you'd like to find out more about Project Black Gold, check us out on social media, on Instagram and Facebook, as well as our website.
Now that we've come to the end of the episode, thank you Qingwei for joining us today and sharing about Project Black Gold and how composting works. Personally, I started off not knowing what to expect, but it doesn't seem so difficult after all. Well, this could be the next thing on my New Year resolution list. Thank you for joining us today, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye!
Bye!
And for all of our viewers who are watching, we have something special for you. We'll be giving away one set of reusable cutlery from Sunskin and a storybook set to one lucky winner. To take part in the giveaway, all you have to do is head over to our giveaway post on our Facebook or Instagram page. Comment on the giveaway post with your answers, like and share this episode, and follow at projectblackgold.sg, at Sunskin Singapore, and at ssgallery.sg page to enter. For more bite-sized sustainable lifestyle content, catch the next episode of EcoBytes on 20 February. For more information, head over to our Instagram or Facebook page at ssgallery.sg to find out more. Thank you, and we'll see you in the next episode. If you are still unsure about where to start your sustainability journey, one good way is to download the Sunskin app onto your phones. Sunskin is a mobile app that rewards you with cashback for making sustainable choices. All you have to do is to download the free app, which allows you to choose a charity or cause that you wish to support. Complete actions like participating in sustainable events and supporting sustainable stores to gain points. The more points you earn, the higher your reward tiers and impact. To get started on your sustainability journey, head over to the Sunskin app, search for EcoBytes, and key in the pin code to claim your first 500 points.